Hey, what's up guys? It's your boy Daze, and you're about to watch Thorin rant for about 3 hours.
This is a topic that will come up again and again. It will always be present due to how exposure between different cultures works. And unironically, you can pretty much replace the names with other names from those areas, and we will have these issues rear their heads again. And so I would hope that by doing this video now, it can be relinked again when the issue occurs, rather than people have to make what might seem like abstract or counterintuitive points at the time. So what spurred me to think of this particular topic, something that I've seen happen many times before, was essentially that a Counter-Strike broadcast got the names of two players who are Asian in ethnicity the wrong way around. So in this particular case, it was during a Pro League match, and it was Stewie2K, the entry fragger of Cloud9, and it was Automatic, the sort of mid-round player of Cloud9. And both of them, obviously, to some degree, I believe, are of Chinese or ethnicity in some sense. Now, I've seen this happen in the past with players from other countries as well, or particularly with teams from other countries, where the entire squad's from Korea or China, and it's a Western event. You know, mixing up two of the names or accidentally putting the same photo for two of the players. Likewise, I've seen it happen in other games as well, like League of Legends, when you have some squad, especially a squad that's not very well known, or a squad that entirely comes from a country. Again, Korea, China are good examples if it's a tournament in America. And what will happen is, rather than this just be a light-hearted bit of fun, which sometimes it is, I'll give the community credit, people will suggest that it is in some sense racist. Even the ones who acknowledge it's a joke will sort of imply there's some sort of racial bias going on here. Or they'll be ignorant by suggesting that people should automatically know better. Like, they should just know who all these players are, and they should definitely know all the differences between all other ethnicities and people from other countries, and that somehow it's racist not to know these things implicitly without any sort of research. Now, let's just be clear. In practically every case I've ever seen of this occurring on broadcasts or on websites, it is a clear, purely honest, innocent mistake. The person who does the graphic doesn't happen to know these players very well. Sometimes they might not work in esports or work in esports heavily, especially when it's teams from other countries. They might not follow those leagues. And so when you have these lesser-known teams or lesser-known countries in the context of competing big Western tournaments, it's understandable that the person might get the names mixed up the wrong way around, or accidentally put the same picture for two people where he can't really tell the differences between the people from those countries. Or sometimes, honestly, he's put one at the end, and then he's come to the end, he just doesn't notice, oh, wait a minute, I've got a match up there. He's just thought there's another player of one of them, and he's already moved on in his mind. Maybe it takes him 10 minutes to make that graphic. It's just not racism, though. It's a clear mistake. So likewise, if the players' names are wrong, yeah, it's funny, or it's silly, or someone's fucked up on a very low level, but it's not a racial topic. Like, they're not trying to make some sort of derogatory comment about these players on the basis of their race. Like, haha, I can't even see the difference between these two players. Like, oh, everyone from China, they all look the same to me, so I'll just put up the same picture. That would be ludicrous to even imagine that some graphics guy or some website that's making an image is openly trying to make some sort of racial comment, even on a joking level. They're not doing that generally. They're not even trying to do it like, haha, I can't even tell the difference, so I'll just use the same picture. That's pretty implausible to believe that that's the case going on. So it's not a racial topic. It's not racism. They're not discriminating on them on the basis of race in any sense. Now, I actually want to address this as a topic because it goes beyond these esports examples, and actually it's something that does extend into real life in similar scenarios for each of us, where when you can't tell people apart, or you think they look very similar from a very different culture or country than yours, again, people will somehow imply it's racist or it's ignorant. Now, it's not like people do this maliciously generally. They don't really do it like to say, oh, I can't really tell the difference between them because they're an inferior race and I don't care about them, and to me they're all just uniform and look the same. No, they're not. It's very rare that that's the sense of that you're getting from what they're saying. It's an honest mistake. They legitimately don't know people from that country, haven't had exposure, they haven't been there much, and so they just don't know the difference. They're not deriding them. They legitimately can't tell them apart, whether that's because they're Japanese or Chinese or Korean. By the way, forget just being from the same race, like having a couple of Japanese people and thing. Many people in the West, especially older people or people who haven't been to Asia much, or more specifically, haven't watched K-pop or haven't watched Japanese great movies or haven't watched some sort of esport like StarCraft, like League of Legends, where you're constantly getting big player shots and you're learning all the key little differences of how everyone looks. There are people who think, oh, is that person Japanese or are they Chinese? Oh, is that Korean or is he Chinese? Like they'll get mixed up between even the ethnicities, right? So it can happen between ethnicities and it can happen between the same race. I mean, funnily enough, when I started getting into StarCraft Brood War, all the players there were South Korean when I was watching these OGN and NBC game broadcasts of the OSL and the MSL. And early on, a lot of them looked pretty similar. Like, even though I knew the difference between them, because I could obviously see they had a different name underneath, they had a different team jacket on, sometimes some of them would look really similar. And sometimes there'd be a couple where I would think, man, there seems to be only a few different types of look that they seem to even have in this particular country that, again, I had no exposure to. Before that, I knew nothing about South Korea. Why would I? I had no international relevance for someone from the UK. I'm not from the USA where they have bases there and they'd had the Korean War, etc. It's not really something that had ever impacted on my life or ever been able to force itself and immerse itself into my world. So they looked very similar. Even when I saw... and I went to Korea for the first few times, I would actually sometimes see people on the street and my brain, looking for patterns, would see them, see quite a lot of similarities to a certain player and go, holy shit, is that Jada? No, it's not. When I'd look closer, I'd wait a minute, I'd try to figure out, is there anything wrong here? My brain would forget the parts of the pattern that didn't fit after its initial sort of grab. I'd go, no, that's not, obviously it's not Jada. What the odds he'd just be walking by this cafe here, or that he'd just be with some girl coming past this bus stop here. So, over time, from spending my time in Korea, from watching more and more of the esports, I became sensitized to all the similarities and had looked enough that my brain had started now to memorize and understand the small little differences, the subtle differences. And so suddenly, the differences became all I could see. And now it was very easy to tell the difference between this guy and this guy and this guy, and tell the difference between a Korean guy and a Chinese guy and a Japanese guy. I had to adjust to it, though, and that only happened when it made sense in the context of my life. It wasn't something I sat down and started learning about or had some sort of class where they taught me about. No, what happened is naturally, through exposure and being around these people in my life, and especially interacting with them, so my brain had to learn to understand all the little differences and the nuances, it had relevance to my life now. Well, the reason why people in Western countries often have this issue with Asian people think they look similar is because those ethnicities and the key subtle differences are not relevant to their daily life, and they don't get much exposure with people like that. In Asian countries, by the way, this same phenomenon exists. What happens is they think a lot of white people look the same or basically the same, when sometimes to you or I, because we can see all the differences, you go, there's nothing at all like it. I mean, I've actually had this happen myself, where someone actually thought that a guy I was with, who in no context looked like the person I'm about to name, was just a white guy from America. They thought and were convinced he was the Warcraft 3 legend from Holland, Grubby, when we went to this event in China where Warcraft 3 was very popular, and they were clearly a big fan of Grubby. They were convinced this guy was Grubby. We kept telling them, no, he's not Grubby, he's not. And by the way, he isn't as tall as Grubby, he didn't have the same head shape or the same big chin, didn't even really have the same hair color as him. But to them, they were sure it was Grubby. And yet they're big fans of Grubby. You know, again, it's not ignorance on their part. This is just naturally the way it works. It also has happened with other pros where similar things happened. They came over to one and thought, oh, it's this guy. And sometimes it'd be someone, well, I'll give him credit, it was someone vaguely similar, like two Swedish guys that have blonde hair and sort of a gaunt frame, you know. But even so, you know, you or I, from following the game and, more importantly, from knowing those cultures, would go, no, that's not him, mate. It looks a bit like him, yeah, but it's not him, don't worry. So I wouldn't complain in that scenario and go, bloody racist Asians. They just don't even... So ignorant, isn't it? Now, they must just think we're all the bloody same. No, I wouldn't do that, because what would the necessity be for that guy from this small city in China to know the difference between people from a certain part of the USA and the Netherlands? It wouldn't have any impact on him, right? What the fuck relevance does the Netherlands have on this guy in China? Wouldn't, right? So why would I expect them to know the difference? I wouldn't. And yet, that's what people think in Western countries. And what's bizarre is they'll often do this in Western countries with people who have the least reason to know. So they'll blame their parents for not knowing the differences between some element. So they're a big fan of K-pop or something like that, and they'll go, oh, what, you can't tell the difference between someone Korean and Japanese? No, why would they be able to? Your parents probably don't watch a lot of Japanese movies. They don't watch K-pop. They don't know anything about esports. Why would someone who'd lived all their life in England or in a certain part of, like, you know, just a farm town in America, why would they have any understanding of these nuances? It's also probably not something they've devoted much time in their brain to, because guess what? They're not required to. It's not some sort of important thing. You're not somehow racist if you don't learn about Japanese culture and their aesthetic qualities if you live in Kansas, by the way. There's no obligation whatsoever there, no matter what some idiot social justice warrior might in fact try to tell you. So, is this all just some huge conspiracy? No. These people genuinely just don't know the difference. There's so little utility for them to know the difference. It would be of no value to them, essentially, in their everyday life and functional relationships. Because if it was, their brain would start to learn, just like they do in many other areas. And would they know if they had gone under the experiences you'd gone under? Yeah, probably. If they were into the things you were into, or they'd had as much exposure, then they would start to know. Should we really have, like, school classes to make everyone know the difference between all ethnicities? No. Now, if someone's legitimately using race to deride someone, yeah, that would be an issue. That would be racism. That's not at all what we're talking about here. So this is just complaining for the sake of complaining when you break it down. It's an element of outrage culture where, first of all, people themselves have been so brainwashed by modern propaganda that they're so terrified of being called a racist themselves that they actually are on the lookout before there's been any racism for anything that they're worried might be racism, and then they want to be the one who speaks out that it is racism. Oh, this is racism. Oh, that might be racist. So then they feel like, see, everyone knows that I know what racism is and that I mustn't be racist because I'm the one calling it out and policing everyone else's behavior. So I can't be racist. First of all, there's that element going on. And then also, people get to feel better because they get to go, since I know that could be racial and you don't, then you're a racist. And since you're racist and I've defined it like that, my definition in terms of identity is I am not a racist, and therefore I've shown that you're sort of a bit inferior because culturally you're a racist, whereas I'm not a racist, so I'm superior. And you get to feel good about yourself in that sense as well. And if you're very, very naive, maybe you also think, oh, I'm really helping out all these Chinese or Japanese people who are players because the bloody racism they have to put up with now. But there's none. So again, link this video next time you see people bring up this nonsense, or when an obvious, simple mistake that's no big deal gets brought up or even suggested if it's racism, this is where you go.